Absolutely. Thank you, Randy. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and everyone here across Central Region, and maybe even someone out and some folks outside Central Region too, if they're on this webinar phone call as well. So yeah, thanks, Randy, for the introduction. I'm Jared. I'm with the National Weather Service out here in Cheyenne, Wyoming, WCM here. And this is really going to be about a really exciting project that initially kind of started down in Southern Region when I was at both Jackson and San Antonio, but really has kind of blossomed here in Cheyenne and across Central Region, and really kind of the agency as well. As far as the overall situational awareness for emergency response across the landscape from multiple different hazard aspects. So here on your screen, we have just 3 of those specific hazards kind of in the upper left. You have that really significant river flooding that occurred during the winter to spring of 2019 across Nebraska, where the ground was still frozen, and then they got a lot of rain on snow event right there. And then so taking that perspective, taking that picture, in what way potentially can we as the Weather Service be a bit more prepared to highlight that particular hazard as far as river flood extent possibilities? Maybe there are some AHAPS-based river flood extents already in place, which is most excellent. Maybe there's some core models that have already taken place, but maybe we can also start looking at additional river flood model aspects that might be able to give us both internally within the office for messaging purposes and externally for partner and state level awareness of just how bad a situation might be. So we're going to explore that here in just a little bit too. Down there in the bottom left, then we have this massive convective system, convective storms all across, say, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, and that may end up coming down there towards Kansas City and Missouri. You know, from a state perspective or from a local county emergency management perspective, how can a state from the EM perspective or a local county perspective better understand what the hazards are for a particular day? Weather Service is likely putting out situational reports, likely putting out graphicasts, likely putting out weather stories, which is excellent. But what can they look at in real time for going from passive situational awareness more to an active situational awareness for their possible deployment of possibilities regarding maybe severe storms or a squall line or an MCS potentially coming through to where they then hit their trigger points, their decision trigger points of, okay, we need to put some boots on the ground to get out to the impacted areas. And then they're kind of front center a little bit to the right are wildfires. And most of Central Region doesn't deal with too much with significant wildfires. It certainly does occur grass fire wise, especially whenever you have some drought conditions in place. But certainly on the western periphery of Central Region, out here in the Rocky Mountain WFOs, this is definitely a big concern for us, not only for fire starts and fire ignitions, but certainly just after post fires occur, where you have debris flow and flash flooding concerns that can even be ongoing while the fire itself is ongoing. So all of that is kind of wrapped up in how can a overall situational awareness viewer help with all of this awareness for these hazards. And that's really how the SAFER came about. So SAFER, again, situational awareness for emergency response. So we're going to kind of focus on the flooding, storm, and wildfire aspects, but there's certainly multiple realms for tropics and for aviation, as well as other particular hazard programs as well, like heat and heat wave, and then also winter as well. So I just want to offer a quick special thanks to Randy Graham and the organizers of the Central Region Speakers Series. Thank you very much. And then also some of the other NWS GIS team members. SAFER wasn't really created in a vacuum just by me. It originated here, but through talking and working with others across this great agency, it's kind of evolved and become what it's become. So thank you very much to that. And this great background image just taken from the International Space Station. You just kind of sit back, relax, enjoy the rest of the presentation, just looking at that nice, relaxing blue marble that we have there. And essentially, it's really emphasizing the point of the blue ocean that we have. And about 4 years ago, whenever I was part of BLAST down in Southern Region, BLAST is the equivalent of LEAD for Central Region. And in going through that class, we were introduced to a concept of innovation or non-innovation. And that concept was known as a blue ocean and red ocean strategy. So that's kind of the segue for looking at that blue ocean right there into this quick strategy that we're going to talk about real fast. So you have blue ocean and red oceans. So you kind of to get yourself oriented, you have products and services right here on the left axis right there. And then you have markets and customers down here on the bottom, say on your x-axis, and your y-axis here. So where you have existing markets and customers and where you have existing products and services, that's really kind of a saturated market, a saturated location where certain products and services live and who they're useful for. But what's really important, in the age of business and even in government, which is obviously where we are, whenever we can produce new products and services, well, that's a new blue ocean to explore. Or whenever we can work with new markets or new customers, say the agricultural community, those that are affected significantly by drought, those that are significantly affected by hailstones with the farm service agencies as well, or new partners that come in and come out of county locations or city locations, whether you have a city emergency manager or a county emergency manager or a regional district emergency manager or a state liaison, so to speak. And then you can kind of work with those new partners and customers there too. And then what's really exciting is that whenever you can work in new markets and customers and you're innovating and creating new products and services. So kind of whenever you're looking at a red ocean, that's kind of where you have existing products and services and existing markets and customers where, everything's really saturated. You're kind of defending your current territory, so to speak, from a business perspective. But if you have kind of that blue ocean, then that's where you're really innovating and you're pursuing new opportunities and perspectives. So to kind of give some examples, as far as companies out there, so to speak, or organizations, you got TikTok out there. So TikTok is just a really cool, fun app that a lot of the younger generation has really taken a hold to. So the market and the customers, that younger generation has always been there. It's just a matter, it's a very new product and new product and new service. Tesla, also really good example there. There's always been that car buying market and the customers have always been there. But now you got this new product, new service as far as Tesla goes. And then now let's move over here towards the new products and service, the new markets and customers. So you have Amazon. So Amazon, you have all these products and services that are out there, and then you go on Amazon and it's able to deliver to a heck of a lot more people for those markets and for those customers. So there's a good example there. Now, when you can really innovate, and here are just a couple examples, there's a lot more, but as far as new products and new services, and then also new markets and customers, you have Apple, with the iPhone. Before the iPhone and the smartphone, that whole market didn't exist. So they created a whole new product, i.e. the iPhone, and then they created a whole new substructure under that with all the apps that then go, with smartphones now. And then, very recently in the news, you got SpaceX, where they've delivered a whole new system for the United States and NASA to be able to get up and down to the International Space Station. So they created this whole rocket and the capsule and everything, and then they also now are moving into new markets and customers. So there's a really good example for there. So the question is where does the Weather Service fit in all of this? So generally government, we are generally probably more or less in the red ocean to where we can locally innovate, which is excellent, but we're kind of tied to directives. Directives are important, no problems there. But at times we can really move into new products and services, locally, regionally, nationally. And then we can also look to work into getting into new markets and customers locally, regionally, nationally too. So that eventually we can move up. Like an example here will be like IBW tags. It's a new product, new service, for the TOR warnings, and then eventually the new severe thunderstorm warnings that will be coming down the line. new products and services, maybe for local office, like here in Cheyenne, we're about to start air quality alerts for wildfire density and smoke that might have respiratory impacts for individuals. And then Facebook Live. Facebook Live has really helped not only us, but a lot of different other offices. And then we're now almost about to explore Instagram again for another occasion. So there's another product and service that, we're moving out of that red ocean and kind of upwards into that product and service blue ocean. Well, how about moving into markets and customers? So for ArcGIS Online web mapping services, we're definitely moving into new customers and new markets there, to where we can deliver all the information we have internally now externally that can be ingested by state level GIS partners, by FEMA, and by so many other different aspects right there as well. So then we can also get a greater public reach and public market reach there as also. So another aspect is how we can move to the diagonal, to where we can create these ArcGIS Online dashboards as well. So we're creating a new product, not only internally for our increased situational awareness, that then can translate into increased text and improved text in a severe thunderstorm warning or a flash flood warning, especially if that flash flood warning is for a burn scar that's a very localized small area, but you have to get really detailed as what the impacts might be. So another example would be like fire partner or agricultural outreach here, where we're creating potentially new services or products and email heads up to them, specifically tailored, for the cattle that might be extremely impacted during their calving season, and a bomb cyclone blizzard might be approaching or about to occur, so that they can try and take any type of mitigation aspects to try and save as much calves and cattle as much as possible. So that's kind of some examples of how the Weather Service can innovate not only in products and services, but innovate in markets and new customers, and then potentially and hopefully really excitingly create both at the same time and kind of move in that diagonal direction. So just here are some examples of a little bit of the red ocean that the Weather Service lives in a little bit. There is some flexibility, but generally we're kind of locked in. A severe thunderstorm warning is a severe thunderstorm warning from, quarter-size hail, 58-mile-an-hour winds, and, you toss a tornado in there potentially too. So, the SPC does the watches. The watches happen as they are, which is great. That's our bread and butter. And then the social media channels, we are, Facebook heavy, Twitter heavy, and then actually kind of going into more of a blue ocean Instagram, which is great. But it's the creativity of the local offices that really help those channels right there. NWS web pages, those awesome CMS pages don't have super great flexibility, but potentially moving into ArcGIS and some of the online aspects in that, you can really liven up some of those web pages as well. So NWS routine text products, your VTech codes very much locked in, and that's where that route goes there. And numerical weather prediction output, model output, that's where we're developing and innovating, but it's generally you have the HUR, you got the RAP, you got the GFS, you got the Euro, and you can try and look at all of that, but those are the exact products that we create. Now, as far as blue ocean possibilities, you can really get into the IDSS, GIS, AGOL services, and river flooding GIS output, post-wildfire, flash flood and debris flow vulnerability, and then all of that kind of combined really allows the Weather Service from a local office to a ROC for regional aspects and coordination to local to the regional FEMA offices as well. It can really help integrate the message of what is happening locally to regionally to nationally, and vice versa. What's the big picture down to the hyper local awareness, and what's the communication in between? So taking all of that that's on the right side, and then that really helps open up a lot of the aspects on the left side as well, to where a lot of those kind of stay the same, but the outputs can dramatically change and really assist with the situational awareness and the messaging towards any particular hazards. So in a big nutshell, SAFER is just an AGOL, which stands for ArcGIS Online platform that's created to enhance internal weather service and external emergency management and public situational awareness for impact-based decision support. So it's really going, how can somebody that sits at an emergency management office or desk go from understanding what the potential hazards are of a day to passive observation and monitoring to then seeing certain conditions change, thresholds and triggers crossed, to active monitoring, to then becoming much more tactical in their approach towards whatever impact may have occurred. So essentially it's kind of going through that route. And so SAFER is really a collection of story maps and operations dashboards that are thematically designed with specific map layers and web mapping services for weather and associated natural hazards, from the big picture to the hyperlocal aspect. So that picture that's down there in the bottom left, that's one of our local emergency managers, Terry Stevenson, up in Platte County, where I was going up to meet with him. And then we're just sitting there talking about what in your county keeps you up at night, and which areas, especially flooding wise, do you think are really concerning to you, and what do we need to be concerned about at the office if we see certain conditions met. So we could actually use SAFER, especially the flooding SAFER aspect of it, and we'll go through a quick demo here soon of, okay, which areas are most concerning, and then we can use this online platform to look at his specific county or his local jurisdiction. And in this picture, he's showing where he's really concerned about certain situations flooding if they get so much rainfall, and that location is just downstream of a dam as well. So using this platform kind of allows us to have that effective communication across a very common platform. I can look at the exact same thing, or you can look at the exact same thing in the office with an emergency manager that they can also see from their desk wherever they may be as well. So in that central example, in a river flood extent model that was created down in Texas whenever I was there, we had a significant rainfall event to where we got 5 to 7 inches in about 2 hours, and then over a 3-hour time frame, we were pushing 10 to 13 inches. And so we had a essentially river creek flash flood, and based off this output and being able to share this platform with the internal emergency managers, this isn't public, but it was internal to the emergency manager, they were able to potentially see what could flood across the landscape, and if there was any camping sites, if there was any vacation homes, which in this case there were, along this river in the hill country of Texas, then they were able to make quick evacuations of those potentially vulnerable locations. So then you can take that common operating picture of what we're seeing in the office to what they potentially might see on the ground out there as far as impacts. They can go from that strategic high level, okay, this could be bad, to this is bad, what do I need to do to protect everybody? Which is exactly the mission that we have too. So this particular aspect of SAFER, at least right now, is being used in law enforcement dispatch centers. It's used in some hospitals for their awareness. Many hospitals have protocol that if they go under a tornado warning, then they have to follow specific protocol of how they move some of their patients and where they move their patients, obviously to the interior part of the building. And then obviously state level to even local county EOCs. And the picture on the bottom right is a picture of the Wyoming Traffic Management Center there at WYDOT, Wyoming Department of Transportation. And then you can kind of see SAFER is kind of there in the center bottom with that red, yellow, and green coloring as well. And you actually see it over on the far right screen too, to where they can monitor where the storms are, where the potential hail is, especially during convective season. And then they'll actually put out messages to those that subscribe to them of hail will be covering I-25, or hail will be covering I-80 between mile marker 200 to 205. So using that aspect and using SAFER. So here's an example. What are some examples of ArcGIS online story maps? Some of us have certainly seen many of them, and certainly seen this one that has become very prolific over the past several months. And so this was obviously the John Hopkins University COVID one. We've seen this one quite often. And now that we're really in this virtual world, we can use ArcGIS Online to deliver a lot of virtual briefings as well. So yes, we use PowerPoint. PowerPoint is great and it has its place, but if you need to present a briefing or give a briefing, or something is occurring in a very short amount of time and you need some go-to maps, go-to graphics, then ArcGIS Online is certainly the way to go. So there's just an example from John Hopkins. Here's an example of utilizing this GIS Online technology from FEMA, using that RAP tool. If you guys have seen that, it's fantastic, very robust data set. And then it also now includes some of the Weather Service web mapping services, which is most excellent. So there's another example. FEMA does hurricane incident journals. So here's an example of a hurricane incident journal from last year, talking about where the main hurricane threats and hazards are. And this is certainly probable and easily adaptable on the Weather Service side. So how can the Weather Service, being the authoritative source of this information, deliver these types of maps, these types of graphics to state level, county level, maybe federal level, and FEMA level partners? So here's another example. FEMA Region 7 has a flood journal. So whenever you had a lot of river flooding going down the Missouri and many of those locations as well, flowing from Nebraska down towards St. Joseph to Kansas City, and then you can see the Mississippi River is also very high there. There's a really good example of utilizing that GIS information online that automatically updates. Going out further west, obviously not Central Region, but certainly something we deal with here in the west part of Central Region, just an example of all the different aspects that one can create. Really, the imagination is the only limiting factor for all these. So Cal OES, their Office of Emergency Services, has created how they track and move resources and allocate for planning with all of the wildfires that they have. FEMA again created some specific wildfire ones. This was for the Camp wildfire that unfortunately did a lot of significant damage to Paradise a few years ago. And then in another aspect too that we can utilize this for is research and working with other emergency management partners. So here's an example of utilizing in a experimental prototype of river flood extent mapping that is hopefully coming soon here to Central Region in some regards as well. But this was done down along the Colorado River in the Texas coastal plains, where I used to work in the San Antonio office, due to the excessive rainfall that fell from Hurricane Harvey. So we can actually use ArcGIS Online and some other GIS techniques to then show an emergency manager from the city of LaGrange that we see here, or to the county itself, what is going to be the significant impacts? If we have a high confidence or low confidence of the water getting to this location. So we can utilize this technology that is available to all offices through ArcGIS Online and through the enterprise license agreement. This is all possible in showcasing to local partners that we have. And then what's really interesting and really awesome about it is that this is all online. So this right here is SAFER encapsulated in a electronic incident command system, or another aspect of a web EOC. So an electronic EOC platform, and then they can embed this platform, they can embed SAFER platform within their own actual emergency management platform. So if you want to kind of think back to the red ocean and blue ocean, not only are we creating a potentially new product as far as AGOL goes, but then we also just moved into and more into the emergency management space to help them additionally maintain their situational awareness for potential river flooding or wildfire or debris flow, flash flooding, or severe weather aspects. So really, how is the Weather Service launching into this GIS IDSS Blue Ocean? So essentially, it's really started at the grassroots. It started at the local WFOs. It started at many of the local RFCs. But that effort is really being consolidated now, and which is exciting too, because once you kind of get all these really good ideas and consolidate them at a regional, and then now we're getting to the national level, you can start to put the policy pieces in place, and you can start to put the teams in place, and you can start to put the overall vision in place. So it's really, really exciting of how we're starting to launch into this IDSS Blue Ocean, to where we start, not only helping us internally for greater situational awareness for those extra details, but then also how we can help externally with say the city, county, or even state level emergency partners, and then even beyond that, FEMA regions and even national aspects as far as dashboards go. So essentially, we're kind of at, if you want to make some sports analogies, we're kind of at the 7-yard line trying to go forward. We're kind of in the bottom of the first inning trying to go forward. But we're definitely on the moving forward aspect, which is really exciting. If you want to think about it, from a rocket launch perspective, we've cleared the tower, and we are currently approaching max dynamic Q pressure. But we want to try and push through that pressure, and then see where we can eventually land and go into orbit with a lot of this exciting opportunities. So to kind of encapsulate SAFER in and of itself, it's broken off into several different applications that are specific to program and hazard areas. So you have Storm SAFER that focuses on convective hazards, severe tornado, flash flooding primarily, and anything SPC related. Then you have Wildfire SAFER, anything still kind of SPC related on the fire aspect, but where a fire starts, how fast is it growing, potentially what does the perimeter burn scar look like? Does that perimeter burn scar intersect with any structures? And do we need as a local office, need to be maintaining awareness for any evacuation immediate possibilities? And then you have Flood SAFER, not only for flash flooding that comes from MRMS, but also river flooding as well. So that's where that aspect comes in. And those three are kind of the main core at this point, but looking to develop more in the winter SAFER aspect, heat SAFER as well, and then kind of combining all that into an aviation or fly SAFER dashboard, and then in addition, tropic SAFER. So that right there is kind of the core vision of the entire SAFER aspect and GIS AGOL application suite going forward, to where all of that really combines into the weather ready nation SAFER aspect, to really provide not only internal awareness enhancements for us, but also to our core partners on the when, the where, and how bad is it really going to be. So here are a couple screenshots. I'm actually going to jump out of the presentation real quick and do some quick demos, and then we'll kind of loop back in real quick afterwards. So here is this is fully public, fully operational SAFER. So if you wanted to follow along, or if you wanted to check out SAFER later, certainly welcome to. Just Google NWS SAFER. SAFER Hazard Dashboard should be your first or second hit off of Google for sure there. If you want the short link, I'll show that. There's your short link if anyone wants to take a quick picture of it. But I can certainly share some resources later if there are any questions. And certainly you're more than welcome to email me also with this aspect. So just I'll zoom back out. It doesn't default over us. It defaults across the entire country. So we'll just look at the quick Storm SAFER. So since we're still kind of convective season and tropic season, those are the first two tabs up here. But so here's kind of the overall large orientation. So you got your legend over here on the left. You have a list area. If there were any active tornado, severe, or flash flood warnings, they would be listed here. And then they would also show up in a number count right here. So kind of as luck would have it, we are actually in a marginal and slight risk pretty much here across the high plains, Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, and southeast Wyoming today. So you got that marginal risk and even the slight risk across that location. And then you can easily see how I can really give a briefing really quick across a screen sharing platform through Google Hangouts or through WebEx or some other platforms that we have access to emergency managers. It was actually not an hour ago, I was on a state level Wyoming call and was briefing them based off of them screen sharing safer with me. So I can see the screen, I can tell them exactly where the marginal risk is, the severe, the slight risk is, the timing of that risk, and then we can then click over really easily to what are today's hazards. So you zoom in right there, you see obviously the SPC hazards, you see the tornado outlook, so there's your nice 2%. You can see where the hatching is, that darker area for hail. So we're lucky us, we have a 10% hatched for Cheyenne today. We were very lucky yesterday. There was some very significant hail in Weld County yesterday, but had that been about 10 miles north, that would have been a pretty significant event for the city. And then the wind outlook. But this is a national map. Anywhere you zoom, whether it's here in Wyoming or Colorado or Kansas City or up there for the UP of Michigan, then you can see all that as everything updates. Everything here updates on its own automatically as the updates, say, from SPC come out. And then, speaking of SPC, if you wanted to go check out the site, then you certainly can. If you wanted to look at the convective outlooks, not only for today, but hey, what does it look like for tomorrow? Oh, great, we're in another marginal risk here tomorrow. And then, what does it look like the next day? Oh, marginal risk across the northern plains for South Dakota, North Dakota, and they're up there towards Minnesota. And then what's really cool too is that, oh, how do I go back? There's no back button. You can actually just click the back button as you would normally in your browser, and it kind of changes there as well. You can investigate your meso-analysis as you normally can, also all in this one app. So all of this information over here, the lists and the numbers, would automatically update based back on this map itself, regardless of which tab you're in over here. So, if there's any mesoscale discussions in effect, maybe an emergency manager would like to see that. Maybe that's a potential threshold. Or if you're giving a briefing, that really helps. Or if you wanted to see, oh, what were the reports yesterday? You can then see those reports and where they were yesterday. Super close to us, but just south of the border. What do the high-res models look like for today? That's another option that we can look at right there. And then as far as satellite goes, you can then loop into the localized areas anywhere across the country. So we'll kind of go up here towards southern Minnesota. You can click and play that, and you get the latest visible and all the different aspects. Another really neat feature is this expandable tab. So if you think that's kind of small, it kind of is a little bit overall, you can click that up there in the top right, and it expands that whole window across the whole the rest of your view screen. And then you just click it again, kind of the minimize, maximize aspect. And then you can do that with any of them. So on the storm prediction centers, do you think that might be a little bit small? Then you can just click that, and then basically you're looking at your meso-analysis. So that's kind of storm safer in and of itself right there. And then you can easily just go right back to the map. And then as SPSs are issued, as warnings are issued, then they will pop up on this map as well. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess you can say we don't have any right now. But you can click on it, and then that will actually give you the text of the warning product itself. And then so we can just kind of move quickly on over from storm safer to then tropic safer as that loads coming in here. And you can see where Isaias was and is way up there in Quebec now, post-tropical, extratropical, post-tropical, there you go, and its track, and then any other potential regions that National Hurricane Center is following. So you can kind of give them a quick, if you were, say, along the Gulf Coast, East Coast, or hypothetically, say we had a hurricane coming up, say the Gulf Coast, but it say look to stall, say over the Ohio Valley or something like that. This potentially could be something that you could show, but this is generally more for the coastal regions. Then you can go into the tropical 2-day, the tropical 5-day. You can actually embed additional satellite imagery within this entire safer. So whether it's on the tropics aspect, or if it's for your local state or jurisdiction, then you can certainly do that too. So there's, the East Coast, and I've also got the mesos, Meso 1, Meso 2 also in here. So sometimes those mesos are focused on tropics, and then you can see where Meso 2 is today, generally the Central Plains, North Central Plains, which is where the action is likely to be. So if you're an emergency manager, you can kind of shift in and check that out. And then kind of shifting over there towards Flood Safer, this is a very nice dashboard of looking at how many river gauge points are in flood or in action across the entire United States. So it's a really quick snapshot of everything that's ongoing across the entire US in one single aspect. So you can see where everything is either action, minor, moderate, major. You can see some of the residual flooding out on the East Coast from Isaias traversing the other day. And then whenever I zoom in and it refreshes, so to speak, then all the numbers at the bottom will change based off the map extent as well. So you can see which ones your river level statuses are over here on the right, your OBS chart, how many are in moderate, how many are in minor, how many are in action, and then what's the forecast as well. So you got these really nice dashboards aspects. How about rainfall accumulation? So this is looking at MRMS data, and where's your 1 hour rainfall accumulations across the entire country for the past 1 hour? And you can take a look at that. You can even zoom in a little bit more, and then you start to get more of the city boundaries. And then like, oh, which city is being impacted by a lot of rainfall? Looks like Paris, Texas. It's just getting a little bit of rainfall right there. And you can actually see the river basin and watershed that are being impacted also. And then likewise, you can see the 3 hour rainfall also. So you can look at 1 hour, you can look at 3 hour, and then you can actually, under this tab menu here, we can look at a lot more, especially on the main dashboard. So instead of the 1 hour and 3 hour, let's take a quick look at the past accumulation for basically, let's say, the past 72 hours. And let me click on image there. And so you can see, obviously, where the tropical cyclone of Isaias went up the East Coast and where they had some very significant rainfall, essentially from North Carolina, South Carolina, northward to the Adirondacks and Green Mountains of New York and Vermont there. So this can be a really powerful visualization tool, not only for the short-term hazards, but maybe for the long-term duration hazards also. So you have looping radar in here. Many of you have probably seen this one before, where you can go anywhere in the country and click on, say, okay, what's happening here? And then, there's the flash thing. So what's really exciting is if this happens to happen, and once we move away from flash, we can also look at looping radar right here, and the new preview radar app will be part of this also. Another extremely exciting aspect of AGOL is how seamless it works with other GIS applications. So say we needed to do like a downstream or upstream trace of where water is flowing from or to, then you can use this really cool app from USGS. Many of you have probably seen this already. And then you can do a quick upstream trace, click right there, and then it will do a quick, okay, where's the water routing from? Or, if you have a burn scar, where's the water potentially need to fall to really create a significant impact? And then if you wanted to include the USGS inundation maps, they also use Flash. So we'll have to work on getting theirs in there once they update as well. So that's kind of Flood Safer in and of itself. But what's really exciting too with Flood Safer is the RFC possibilities here. Is that, through the RFCs and through some of the river flood extent modeling that's going on, and especially through the conduit of the National Water Center and their output, that can be expressed also within this viewer here. So as far as Wildfire Safer goes, now we're kind of moving from a lot of water to not enough water. And this one's designed a little differently to allow for some additional widgets down here, which are really nice. So it shows all the different wildfire spots and locations and sizes across the entire country and where those might be as well. So if you wanted to draw or change the base map or even print this map, you can totally do that. There are a lot more options that I'm not able to have time to explore here, but some of the really exciting things in this one especially is that flash data is part of this data set. So you can kind of see some of the residual river and runoff modeling that occurred up around here yesterday from some of the storms that we had in the high plains. So this is looking at hydrophobicity. So if it was like pure runoff across the entire landscape, especially if you have a burn scar, this would be a perfect product to look at, especially if you were dealing with, say, the Apple wildfire that's going on down here in Southern California. And luckily there's nothing down there as far as rainfall, but say if you had a rain shower come across that burn scar and then you have the National Hydrography data set show up, then this is really where all really awesome things can happen. Not only do you have that, but then you have all of the small structure footprints also show up too. So then you can see exactly which creek you might need to be able to mention, and maybe a neighborhood that may be directly impacted by rainfall that falls across this burn scar. And this information might not be readily available or input into AWIPS. Maybe you have that in AWIPS, but perhaps you might not have every local stream, creek that might be impacted by a potential debris flow, flash flood. Now, I know this doesn't happen too often in Cross Central Region for the most part that might be on this call, but especially here, say Boulder, Grand Junction, some of our western aspects of Central Region certainly can help utilize this for sure to say, hypothetically, you know, for this Pine Gulch fire that's starting to get going pretty good. If you zoomed into it, you know, are there going to be any possible structures that might be impacted with that burn scar? They're in a red flag warning too, and then you can see that. Don't really see too many structures, which is good. And that can be something for internal situational awareness. There's a couple structures right there, but I don't really see too many out there. But say if you had a passing rain shower, it doesn't take much to create any burn scar, flash flooding, or debris flow possibilities. And then you can see which creeks might be highest at risk for these impacts. And then you can, you can do a briefing if you wanted to, just as I'm doing right now with the county or local EM, to say this is where the concerns would be if we were to have this type of rainfall across the Pine Gulch burn scar. So then you have looping radar watches and warnings. You have the latest weather graphics across Central Region available right there. And another really neat aspect is if an emergency manager had access to NWS chat, then they would actually be able to log in live right there. So what, say hypothetically there's a significant severe thunderstorm warning going on in their county or their jurisdiction, then they would be able to not only see it live happening here, but then they could actually then chat you about what is actually happening. It's like, oh, I see you put out a warning. How does it look? And then you can say, oh, it looks like it's strengthening. We put it out for quarters initially, but it looks like it might be golf balls now, going from maybe 60 to 70 miles an hour. You certainly need to take some precautions and get ready to act just in case there are some impacts to siding or roofing or traffic accidents or something like that. So that in and of itself is kind of the safer dashboard. And I don't have time to unfortunately cover everything because there's a lot of other aspects within the layer lists here. It also includes hospitals. So if you want to see where all the hospitals were located and, okay, how many hospitals are in that slight risk and might be at risk, or where are the fire stations or something like that too. So those are some additional layers that can be overlaid, from a state level perspective to a hyper-local perspective. So I'm going to jump out of this real quick and then go back to the presentation, and I'll try and wrap up here in like the next 5 to 10 minutes. So let me swap here. So here's just an example of safer from a very significant weather day we had here across the high plains. You can see SPC's outlook in the background. You can see the severe thunderstorm watch in the pink in the foreground, and then all the watches and warnings. And on an active day, this is kind of what it looks like, where you have the numbers based off where the map extent is, and then the lists of the actual warnings themselves right there. And then if you clicked on the actual list where it says like CYS or or UNR for Rapid City, it would actually zoom in and on the map and take you directly to that warning on the map as well. So here's kind of some examples of when ESIS was making landfall. You can overlay all the tracks. You got all the Wawa maps. You can actually click on particular zones, and then you can see the text of that particular zone. One can overlay the 34 knot, 50 knot, 64 knot probabilities as well. This was just a quick zoom in of all the flash flooding that was ongoing during ESIS over there for the big metroplex up the East Coast. We kind of reviewed this already, but here's an example from yesterday where you had some significant flooding up the East Coast. And then here's another example just around here where you can really see where the bullseyes of heavy precipitation is occurring and all the local creeks and streams that are potentially going to be impacted there and then downstream. So then based off this alone in SAFER, not only internally to the Weather Service office, but externally to a core partner, they could see that and then start to act. Or then you can also include those local creeks and streams directly in your weather, your flash flood warning, and then also convey that on any graphics, any social media products, and then any NWS chat communications going back and forth. Here's a quick example of Wildfire SAFER. We saw that. If you wanted to also, if you had a local fire and the USGS did some local modeling of debris flow, flash flooding potential, you can even load that into this as a possibility for additional situational awareness for which basins across the burn scar could actually be more or less susceptible to debris flow and flash flooding. And then this type of information can certainly be conveyed to the local town or to any local communities through any community meetings that might occur due to the wildfire, or especially to the county emergency manager. And here's an example from yesterday for the hydrophobic layer from flash that's in SAFER, where we had some pretty significant rainfall locally, but decent rainfall for the high plains here. And then there's the upstream traces. There's where you can see your GraphiCast, very great. And then where you can also have NWS chat live access embedded directly within everything as well for all local one-stop shop plays. So you have warning text specificity increased for those fire partners, emergency managers, state EOCs, maybe even some IMETs that might be deployed, and especially the general public. So here is an example where we had a burn scar, the Badger Creek burn scar in our area, and we had a storm go across it. So we did a flash flood warning for it due to the flash flooding and debris flow potential. And that output that you see on the bottom right is direct output from SAFER that was then used for a social media graphic. So we were able to really quickly turn around from a quickly evolving situation and say, okay, we're having this much rainfall across this burn scar location. Please take immediate safety precautions and action in case there are any flash flow or debris flows within the confines or area of that burn scar. So that worked out pretty well. Again, NWS chat, you can get very specific on NWS chat. Here's an example where it's embedded, whether it's here in central region, southern region, eastern, western, it works everywhere. And then also for Google Hangouts, you can then basically do what I'm doing right now on a screen sharing platform, whether it's Google Hangouts, whether it's a webinar or another platform that we're allowed to use. Then you can do that in this situation where I'm giving a overall large-scale weather briefing from Hurricane Harvey to the city of Austin, Texas emergency management room. So I'm presenting on my screen to the left, I'm sharing it. They have it projected up on their main screen and they're listening to the briefing. If we can't potentially be there in person, which we certainly can't too much right now in this virtual world, this allows that virtual briefing and same common operating platform as well. And then for social media, there's an example right there where that output image right there was taken directly as a screenshot from SAFER and then made into a graphic and then shared out on Facebook and Twitter. In very much beta, we can also create these are technically, apps, so to speak, and not necessarily an app, so to speak, but it's a web page that one can go to. And then essentially it works well on a phone. Here's an example of how an emergency manager or anybody can look at safer aspects, web mapping service aspects from the National Weather Service, on their phone, where they can do the tracing. They can see how much rainfall has occurred. They can see what the latest river stage is near their home for potential decision-making purposes, or for emergency managers as well that are on the go and out on the road responding to something as well. So essentially, we're all here as an agency to bridge these innovative tools across the Weather Service and emergency management span. The science is critical. It starts there, of course, and then we take that science and then we package it into the multiple ways of messaging that we already do, so that we can then shape or help shape the response that might occur to help mitigate any potential impacts through the connections and through the relationships that we establish as an outreach aspect, from a local aspect through region to the national level. And then here's an example picture from the Wyoming Office of Homeland Security, where I'm on the phone, kind of right there in the middle, giving a briefing of what is to be expected for the day. And then what's really great about this is that through ArcGIS Online and how shareable, extensible it is, then Wyoming itself has created its own ArcGIS Online dashboard, in which, for the COVID-19 tracking, a lot of us have probably seen something like this locally for our state or region. But then within the weather tab, you have the authoritative source of the Weather Service right there embedded within them, which is great. So that's on the Wyoming side. Another state we serve here is the Panhandle, Nebraska. And then this is their dashboard, also ArcGIS Online based. So this is their daily sit rep that they put out based off the potential hazards. And then kind of on the left-hand side, you see the different dashboards and NWS watches and warnings and advisories, the safer dashboard, and what the current weather looks like. So again, just like on the Wyoming side, Nebraska has us embedded with them as well. And this can be the exact same thing whether you're in Washington State, California, Texas, or certainly North Dakota, Missouri, Illinois to Ohio. So, and then another really cool blue ocean here for our graphics, our weather stories. Then they actually created tabs there for the entire state of Nebraska, where they then link in the first weather story that each office has. So whether you're Omaha, Hastings, North Platte, then from there, you're going to go across all the different offices, and then you can see the weather stories there. So we're creating it's the same product and service that we already have, but it's presented in a new way to new markets and new customers, to the emergency managers that are looking at this specific site. So that's a great blue ocean right there for our graphics. So here's an example of how they have their local storm reports that are utilizing our LSRs based off their maps. And then again, this is yesterday, so we were very lucky for here in Cheyenne. If that storm had been another 10 miles north, there would have been pretty significant impacts. And here's an example of that impact from that hailstorm. We had like 3 to 4 inch deposition of accumulated hail on the roads just south of the Wyoming-Colorado border. Luckily, it happened in very remote North Weld County and didn't have too great of impacts overall, other than some traffic concerns where they had to get the snow plows out to move the hail. So we'll see how today fares, given our slight risk. So another blue ocean is river flood extent mapping as well. This is an ongoing, exciting project in Southern region where they've had 2 workshops already, and we had some crossover with Central region last workshop too. So likely we'll be seeing a lot more activity on some of this coming from Central region a little bit, hopefully to get more involvement from us for the possibility of river flood extent modeling as well. So you only really need 3 files to operate this model. The extents are produced generally in a matter of hours to maybe a day or so, and have generally really good, reasonable accuracy. And actually, in some cases, have helped some of the HEC-RAS AHAP standards been improved in a couple instances as well. So be on the lookout potentially for hearing some more on that. And this is an example of that river flood extent mapping locations down there in the southern region. This is for Tallahassee and where they have jurisdiction in Jacksonville, to where they are using ArcGIS Online as a mapping resource to hold these river flood extents as well. So this is another really awesome aspect of ArcGIS Online to then convey which areas might or might not be at risk for river flooding based off X amount of feet as it comes up. So hopefully that will be able to come across into the central region here fairly soon. And here's an example of that, where in South Texas or South Central Texas during Hurricane Harvey, we had the Colorado River, nice and low at 5 feet. But now we're telling a core partner that it's going to go from 5 feet to maybe 55 feet in a matter of 2 or 3 days. What does that mean to them? What does 55 feet mean to an emergency manager? What impacts will occur? So we have the E19s, which is great. Sometimes we do have some already AHAPS inundated locations that have been mapped, but for the most part, we're going to be like in between those. So in this case, what occurred and what could potentially occur during the spring snow flood season in central region is that certain maps on an experimental prototype basis could potentially be produced to highlight the overall possibility of where that water might be able to go in particular locations that might be vulnerable. So having those maps and having that information, at least in this particular case, whenever I was working with Janet Kerrigan down there in Texas, these maps and this information can, one, just be used for information, but two, can really help drive decision makers to help ascertain additional resources for what can occur. So to kind of wrap this all up, the Weather Service Evolved mission, if you look at that particular aspect in the impact catalog, within the situational awareness in that COOP section, there's a area for an SA dashboard. And then also in the partner messaging, there's an external dashboard. And SAFER, I believe, helps fulfill several of those aspects right there. And I'm certainly open to ideas and conversations and discussions and how this can work the best everywhere, so that it's not just any one particular location, but it's more of a universal template that then can be built upon by the local expertise that you may have at your office. So we can kind of work on the tropics, the fire weather, the hydrology across all the different regional headquarters. And what's really exciting is that, and this is just kind of very new here, is that hopefully we as a weather service can potentially put together a GIS hub for all of our web mapping services that we produce, all the maps that we produce, or even the websites, the experience websites that we put together that really help pop our web mapping, our web page experience outside of CMS a lot more. So this is a really exciting endeavor. And again, we're like in the bottom of the first inning, the 7-yard line, just off the launch pad. But this is really moving us towards the weather ready nation aspect in the GIS IDSS realm. So we're like I said, we're launching, but how can we try to make sure that we stick the landing too? And that creates and means that we have to have successful management from the local level all the way up through the regional level to national level. And so this multi-regional development and organization is beginning at RFCs, WFOs, even regional operation centers, based off operational status aspects to a lot of the program hazard aspects too. So it's just really exciting to see this going forward. And really it's all about how can we create and produce and assist information from the large scale to the hyper local scale that helps with protecting of livelihoods and preserving memories. And with that, I'll close. Thanks, Randy.